Please. So, please have a seat. Welcome to our next session. It's all about digital signage and future trends in digital signage. My name is Florian Rotberg. I'm from Invidis Consulting from Munich, Germany. And we're specialists in the digital signage world. And I have a great panel here. And I just want to introduce you to start off with. It's Kiersten Gibson from Reach Media. We have here Misty from BrightSign. And we have Sharon from Gensler. So maybe you want to say a few words, Kiersten, to start off with, who you are and what you're doing.
I'm Kiersten Gibson. I'm with Reach Media Network. We provide digital signage software, and I'm our Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing.
Misty?
So I'm Misty Chalk. I am the Director of Sales at BrightSign. I also manage our federal division. That's kind of my background. Everything outside of retail, so all of the commercial.
Designers and technologists working out of Gensler architecture, and happy to be here.
Cool. It's a great panel. We have software here, we have hardware here, we have architecture here, and some of you maybe ask, what is an architect doing here? You will learn a lot because we have some really global trends which are really, really essential for digital signage and have a huge influence on existing projects as well as on new concepts. And the biggest trend probably is sustainability or green signage. I'm from Europe, so obviously in Europe, this topic is a little bit more important than over here, but very important here. Just a small figure to start off with. Last year, half of all big tenders in Europe really required to offer the most sustainable solution. And maybe, Misty, to start off with, because BrightSign, you do media players, power consumption. Is that a topic many customers ask about?
Yeah, so at BrightSign, we do make the purpose-built digital signage hardware. The total cost of ownership of digital signage is a really important topic that we've been having these days. A lot of times because people are kind of moving from that CapEx to an OpEx model, and so that total cost of ownership is important. And so we try to manufacture media players that are going to have really low power consumption and really low total cost of ownership. Part of that is also how we do all of our remote management of hardware and that kind of stuff, because we want to make sure that everything is sustainable in the cloud and over the network. We don't want you to ever actually have to human interact with something once it's deployed. And again, it's all about keeping down that total cost of ownership.
Yeah.
As a firm that designs many millions of square feet of commercial space, retail, workplace, we have done a lot of work on the display endpoints. That is also something we need to consider. So as a group, we're looking at canvas sizes, power consumption, energy efficiencies, and even the smallest thing that we do, for example, how we design content to fit a certain look and brightness and ambient light, being more on a dark background, for example, how we can do that, and just that alone, we bring substantial impact or substantial improvement to the environmental impact of the products that we use. Also, thinking about longevity and how long our installations or designs will exist and be serviceable is also important. Part of the idea is what we call timelessness, or having things remain fresh for many years.
Yeah, and one thing is really important. 80% of the carbon produced in a digital signage project is during operations. So it's really, you don't only have to start with green signage when you install a new network, but it's really, how can you make your existing network more reliable and obviously more efficient? And even one thing is really important, it's like turning off screens at night, turning off media players at night. Really, as an architect, it's something where you always have to teach your customers, make sure, that they turn it off completely, right?
And yes, and of course, and even like I said, does it have to be white background for the LED, or can it be dark background? Or maybe if the space is unoccupied, or we know it's less occupied, we go into a dormant state. And even just those things in content, not even in systems design or equipment selection, we can influence between 30 and even 60% of the power consumption of the space and heat emission.
Misty, you do a lot of software, everything. Sorry.
That's Kiersten.
It's fine.
I'll answer it.
Yeah, we'll go back and forth.
You go together. No. Kiersten, it's really about, you do a lot of software,
Yes.
obviously. So what is the influence of software in regards to having a more sustainable network and operating more efficiently?
Yeah, so we partner with hardware like BrightSign to not only produce the initial implementation, but we focus on the long-term partnership. And for us, of course, it's that long-term sustainability in terms of ensuring the hardware is up to date, that remote management. And as Misty said, that's something that is really important to us. We are a cloud-based solution, So for a cloud-based solution, we can remote into devices like BrightSign, do RS-232 commands from anywhere in the world for a global project. So we have corporations, we're located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Our team's in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but with partners like BrightSign and other hardware companies, it allows us to do that cloud-based management and that remote management for not only their hardware, but their network and also their content management. And one big thing, it's not only about the hardware at the end of the day, it's about the content. Who's managing it, who's keeping it up to date, and really at the end of the day, having that partnership and that human interaction when needed. We want to automate everything in the world, but you also need, at the end of the day, that partnership.
But remote device management is really, really important. Most people just think it's just something, that you have better uptime. But also in regards to green signage,
yes.
It means, you can reduce your service calls. And just as a little number for you, the cost of a service, will rise by probably 30% until the end of the year. We have higher gas prices, it's more difficult to get service personnel, it's everything getting more expensive. So having a more efficient and more reliable system is really, really important.
The one thing I would add too is the automation part of it. So if a device goes offline, what does that look like? An automation notification for that person. Maybe they're in China, Australia. They're not right there, like a corporation that's managing the devices, they get those notifications and can notify those local level users as well. So, and in terms of hardware, partnering with devices like BrightSign, they allow us to really integrate those commands so you don't have to be on site in order to turn off the screen. It can automatically turn off at a certain day because the players and the screens communicate together with the software.
But Misty, I think it's really important because BrightSign, you have a very tough, very robust operating system, which really monitors the device all the time and does things automatically, right? So that you don't get a service call.
Correct. So we offer some software that's actually free of charge, that's remote management of the hardware. And just like BrightSign goes to market, we're very unique. We have an open API, so we allow our partners like Reach Media to pull in those APIs and use that remote management to control the hardware and not only that, but troubleshoot the hardware. You can see everything that's going on in the system, you can change network settings, but even more than that, you can do all of your players set up via the cloud. So again, it eliminates having to have techs on site. Everything's going to be managed remotely, and we give all of those tools to our integrators and our partners for free so that they can use those and really, again, reduce the carbon footprint. We don't want the players to be human interacted with. We want you to be able to manage them via the cloud. And so we provide all of these tools, and it's something that is so important to us that we're continuing to add to those things constantly as far as what we're doing with that. But it's also about the setup of the player, right? So all the players can be set up prior to them even being deployed, which means when you put the tech on site, they just plug them in and then they just move on. So you don't have people, sitting there eating up labor costs trying to set up players.
Yeah, but I think we also need to be realistic, and I'm not sure what your experience is, but we talk about sustainability, we talk about professional remote device management, but in reality, most projects are, somewhere in the Middle Ages in regards to that, right?
We're taking them out of there.
You do have...
It's about education.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. But I think that's not only in North America, it's around the world, to be honest. It's still a long way to go, but we have to raise awareness for that, and we need to make sure that people, have a knock, so they really start monitoring their devices and that they detect problems before that really, something happens.
Right. Signage has become so incredibly important, especially since the pandemic. I mean, it's about getting information out real time to employees, to hybrid employees, to end users. Emergency management notification. It's so incredibly important these days, and to have a screen that goes out, it just can't happen, right? It's just unacceptable in this day and age. And so the remote management and the monitoring of the hardware is extremely important.
The one thing I would say too, what Misty mentioned, is education. You are going to have users of all different spectrums. You're going to have a user that updates a PowerPoint maybe in a different country, and that's all they do. Their device goes out, they're not going to know what to do. So you need flexibility for that user experience. You're going to have people that know the automation, they know what to look for, but you're also going to have end users that need to call or need to submit a ticket to a support service. So automation doesn't just eliminate the human interaction for certain users, and that, like to your point, that we're getting there. But everybody has a different user experience at the end of the day.
And we need ownership.
Yep.
Ownership is really important. In each store, at every location, you need somebody who takes ownership. Because even if the screen runs and somebody puts a poster in front of it, that's nothing you can see, obviously. So ownership and giving the local people, some control over it, it's very important, because then it's not something they get from the head office, but something which really matters to them, and that's really important.
And it does boil down at the end of the day to the education of it, from implementation and who is owning it.
Yeah.
From the one person at the one shop to a large corporation where it is their IT and marketing.
I think the biggest disconnect I actually see is that it always comes down to the why, and very few end users can actually answer that question. Why are you doing it? Like, what is your end result look like? What does success look like for you? And that is a really important question to ask, because that's going to determine the success of your project and what you do and how you implement it and who you choose as a partner.
Yeah.
I can't stress how much the why is important. And why is not just, it goes to the point of why you're doing this, but also what is the message you're trying to communicate? What's the medium you want to communicate in? Does it have to be that big? Also, when you communicate the message, there is a lot of things about content freshness, like you said, updating of content. If you ask me about trends, I think over the last few years we've seen more and more customers understand the cost of managing and maintaining fresh content, not the technical side, but the content creation and production side, and understanding that, well, if we have a message that was more data-driven or more real-time driven, information-driven, we can actually keep that message on air more times without it feeling stale, keeping it useful. Even further than that, if we have an artistic representation of something, like an art installation or even a branding moment in a big corporate lobby, or in just making that system generative, and means that you're never going to see the same thing twice. And that also helps, as far as we're concerned, sustainability, because it keeps that one display endpoint fresh, relevant, and hopefully in service longer. So you don't have to recycle and rethink things.
But Eran, we haven't really talked about the role of digital in spaces, like in lobbies or so. Could you give us some examples and why architecture practice like Gensler is now heavily investing into signage and into digital in general?
So Gensler, as a group, Gensler is a very large group that has several practices. Originally, the brand design practice was the one in charge of how to manifest a company's brand or tell their story in the physical space. All of the work we do is in the built environment, so it made sense. As brand became more and more digital, right, that's when DXD came about. And our group is really about telling stories in the built environment or creating experiences in the built environment. Now, originally it used to be a moment in a lobby or maybe an executive briefing center, maybe a corporate experience center, etc. But you now communicate emotions and experiences and brands almost throughout the entire corporate landscape, as well as in public domain. So whenever we have to tell a story and create an experience, the digital tools we use are a medium that's increasingly more understandable to people, more relatable to people, and thus we can use our tools to better extent. Whereas before it would have been a moment or a blip, or it would have been more of an informational type of display. Those lines can be blurred now. People are used to a lot richer content thanks to their mobile devices. So in a way, we're bringing those things into the built environment.
Yep. We have one question, which is in regards to hybrid work, and Eran, maybe that's something to all of you. But as you're the architect or working for Gensler, how difficult? Are there any different systems you need for like a meeting room system versus like a workspace system or so, or does it make sense to have a combined solution?
We can spend so much time on the hybrid question work, but in a way, people have gone to be able to work remotely. And the corporations are now realizing, yes, productivity can happen outside, but there is a certain element that happens in the space when people are together that we are missing. So trying to bring people back into the office is obviously, a lot of companies are trying to aspire for it. One of the challenges of return to work, and this is one of the things that Gensler does almost, I think, more than any other architecture firm, is understand how do we make the workplace equitable for both remote and local participants? How do we create an enticement or an engagement for people to come to the office and collaborate again? Basically, that's almost the core of that aspect. And so when it comes to meeting spaces, the meeting spaces have to try to reflect now the people in the room and the people that are remote in an equitable way, for lack of a better term.
So the hybrid workplace is such a trending thing right now in signage, and there's so many things that we're doing to kind of tie all this in together. So what we're looking at for like the new smart building, which is really bridging that gap between the remote employees and the in-person employees, it all ties into your signage program. It can do room scheduling, it can do hot desking or hoteling, which is a really popular thing where you book your desk. That way we can make sure that everybody's staying safe and 6 feet apart and doing what we have to do. But all of this content that you have around your spaces also can go out to your workstations. So the people at home are getting the exact same information as the people in the office, which is really bridging that gap of information. And then again, it's all tying into all of these different scheduling and the wayfinding, and you can do occupancy sensors, you can do analytics and metrics, and you can see how many people are in the building and how long are they in there and which rooms are they using. And there's so much information that's all tied together now into your signage program. And that's really something that we've seen advance because the adoption rate of all this interactivity since the pandemic, it's so much higher than it ever was.
Well, the other thing is too, adapting to, or having the flexibility to adapt to all user experiences. So when Misty mentions wayfinding, having the ability to take it with you if you need it, or taking the signage with you, or for remote employees, for example, embedding it into your intranet. You have different solutions where you have that flexibility to push content from a central platform where it is remote, but you also have different experiences where you might not want to scan a QR code, you want to touch the screen. You know, there's so many different ways that you can use digital signage, but then everybody coming together and managing from a central platform.
Yeah, I think what the biggest change we've seen in the past month is really that everything digital signage in the office space has really become business critical. You need to have that nowadays. It needs to be reliable, it needs to work. It's the same with digital signage at airports. You have to close the airport terminal. We had that in London, for example. They had to close the terminal when the system went down. So we're talking about business criticalness. So it's not just taking the cheapest software, the cheapest hardware. It's really having the right concept, the right service concept. And we just got a question here, how easily available is digital signage hardware technology? I'm sure you can get media players from Misty easily, but you also have challenges, obviously, with the supply chain. But how does it look like, Kiersten?
I was told I would not have to talk about inventory.
Good, then we don't talk about your inventory, but I know that obviously there's a big challenge in the market. That we are where we are, and it's not something which kills every project, but sometimes it takes a few weeks, a few months.
Yeah, but I think
you need to be flexible.
Manufacturers are doing an amazing job of kind of redoing their technology and redesigning it around different types of parts and chips and things like that so that we don't end up in this situation again. So I feel like we're going to be coming out of it here pretty soon. We're still in it, but I feel like it's getting better. I mean, for BrightSign, we do have certain models that are actually in stock, which is, hallelujah. But I do feel like a lot of manufacturers are redesigning products so that this doesn't happen again. I think it's been a really big learning experience for all of us. And so I feel like we're going to be coming out of some of these challenges as far as the chip shortages are concerned, as soon as some of these new products start shipping.
But I think that the flexibility in design of product is one of the key things, being able to work around different chipsets or things like that. But in general, what we need to do is also understand that extending the horizon of what we need to source and what we need to procure will help us a long way, even in the immediate term.
Well,
just we're seeing that. So.
I was going to say, to just go off that too, a lot of places already have their devices or screens already in place. With BrightSign, for example, for us, we're able to use a cloud solution with them to, repurpose those players. They might, their players might have been out there for 4 or 5 years, but they're still powerful, working, they're up to date. So having that remote management to update the software to use at that time, you're going to be purchasing more hardware at the end of the day, but using what you have out there as well. So having that remote capability to repurpose maybe someone that is using it for a very simple solution and then enhancing it with more dynamic content.
Yeah. And Kiersten, by the way, that also is more sustainable.
Yep.
If you use hardware longer, you need to give it a second
life.
Refurbishing becomes a really, really big topic. It was absolutely no-no a few years ago, but now it's really, you can maybe move them to the back of office or somewhere in the logistic or so, but you can really do that. You don't always have to buy a new stuff, Obviously, everyone loves to sell it, but we need to look how we can reuse certain hardware.
Well, and in the short term, you might want to get, new hardware across the board, but in the short term on some of this stuff, looking at how you can repurpose it is good too.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have only 9 seconds left. We have a lot of questions here, but we're still here to answer these questions. So thanks to all of you. And digital signage is a fascinating technology, and it's really growing 20% every year. So hopefully you can also make use of it. Thank you.
Thank you.